20 years ago, a Canadian author by the name of William Young wrote a story for his children. And he made this wonderful imaginative story, and they loved it, and some of his friends wanted to read it. And they did, and they said, you know, you really should publish this. And so he self-published, which usually, means, you buy most of the copies and give them to people that will take it. But anyway, it became a huge seller, and it's called The Shack. Some of you are familiar with it. It's not to be interpreted literally. It's just a way of experiencing an idea of how God can enter our lives. If you haven't seen the movie or read the book, the background of the story is a man named Mackenzie Phillips, and he went by Mac, has taken 3 of his children camping in the Pacific Northwest. And 2 of his children are in a canoe that turns over, and one of them is trapped underneath, and he rushes in the water to bring his son out of the water and then give him artificial respiration. And meanwhile, there's a serial killer that has stolen his youngest child, a girl. And her bloody clothes are found in this shack in the woods. And they didn't find her body. Mac's life sinks into what he calls the great sadness. 4 years pass, and he gets a postcard. It's a strange note from somebody named Papa inviting him to come to this shack in the woods. And his family has something else to do on the weekend, so he goes, and in this shack he encounters the 3 persons of the Trinity. God the Father takes the form of an African-American woman. Jesus is a Middle Eastern carpenter with a nice beard. And the Holy Spirit is manifest as an Asian woman. And the bulk of the book is about Mac's conversations with God as he comes to term with his daughter's death. You'll see a scene that is toward the middle of the movie. It's on a lake near the shack. The Jesus figure has invited Mac to take a rowboat out into the lake. Can you imagine? The author says the whole thing, the shack, is a figure of speech, it's a metaphor for the house you build out of your own tank. The places you get stuck, you get hurt, you get damaged, the thing where shame or hurt is sin. I have another similar story. It's from the book of John's Gospel, and it said Jesus had gone to Jerusalem, and there by the sheep gate, there are a lot of gates in the city, there's a pool the Hebrews call Bethsaida. There were porticos, little areas around the pool. And in these porticos, many people lay who were invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. There was a man there who had been ill for 38 years. And Jesus saw him, and he knew he had been there a long time. And he said, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." There was a legend there. From time to time, an angel would come and stir up the water. And if you got in the pool first, you would be healed. And Jesus said, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. That day was a Sabbath. last Sunday in Atlanta, there was a graduation, as there was in a lot of schools and colleges last weekend. And usual at the college, they had invited a member of the public who, as usual, was a philanthropist and who was going to give money or had given money to the school, would be getting an honorary degree. And this person was invited to make the commencement address. There were about 400 graduates, and they sat there listening to the commencement address, and there is some similarity to those things, and they're waiting to walk across the stage and get their diploma and move on with their life. In the middle of the remarks made by philanthropist Robert F. Smith at Morehouse College, he said, "My family is going to be setting up a trust fund to pay off all my classmates' college debt." And then there was like silence. And then a few seconds later, there was some gasp. And then there was cheering. I think they started cheering MVP. Can you imagine? A lot of those students were sitting there trying to figure out, how am I going to pay off my college debt? I'd like to get on with my life. Can you imagine a day when good news changes everything? The story from John is one of many stories of, I guess, strange and miraculous healing. It's kind of different for several reasons. First of all, Jesus asked this question, do you want to get better? Which, isn't that kind of hurtful? If you're really sick, or you have some kind of disability, or you're in pain, and somebody asks you, do you want to get better? It's like, oh, of course I do. If you ask that question, you're kind of implying that your illness or problem is partially your fault. Isn't that right? If you ask, do you really want to get better? Maybe it was an insult. Maybe it was a bit of truth. We have lots of examples of Jesus being compassionate about people's needs. He was the one that said, you're not sick because of something you did or your parents did. You're sick because you're sick. And he continually showed compassion to people that had needs. And the man said, he didn't answer the question. He said, well, I can't get in a pool. How unfair the world is. Someone always beats me. Have you at some time ever in your life felt like that Jesus was asking you a question like that? Like, do you want to be well? Do you want to be all that you might be? Do you want to get rid of the things that keep you from being all you might be? Do you want to be made well from the attitudes that subvert having quality relationships? Do you want to be made well from the habits that diminish your health? Or do you want to just keep your misery because it works for you, It's at least the misery you're used to. And you don't have to give God any control in your life. Because, after all, you know what's in your best self-interest. I like a woman that writes on the web quite a bit. Her name is Debbie Thomas. And she said, for me, this question, do you want to be made well, stings, because I know exactly what it's like to say I want out, to say I want freedom, to say I want healing, and not quite mean it. I know what it's like to cling to brokenness because it's familiar. I know what it's like to make victimhood my identity. I know what it's like to benefit from the very things that cause me pain and harm. I know what it's like to sink into self-pity. I know what it's like to assume that everyone else has access to a magic pill I'll never get my hands on. I know what it's like to decide that I'm doomed to sit at the very edge of healing for the rest of my life and never attain it. I've done counseling both as a counselor and a client. And I understand how desperately all of us want to hang on to what doesn't work because we're familiar with it. We resist change even though everything in our brain is saying, this can help you, this can make things better. We remain stuck. And if you watch the Restaurant Impossible show, where there's some poor folks that have this terrible restaurant, and Robert Irvine comes in and fixes it all up for them, you know. And there's all this drama about them letting go of the way things would be. And sometimes it's a family restaurant, you know, and they have all their family memorabilia around. And my favorite one was from the second season. It was a little town in Pennsylvania, and there was an Italian restaurant called Mama D's. Not only was it a restaurant full of the family clutter, it was also a vineyard and a petting zoo. So you had all the junk on the inside and all the smell on the outside. You know, and of course, the first day when Robert Irvine arrived, they didn't want to change anything. I can't get rid of these animals. So Jesus said to the man, do you want to be made well? Well, we've all probably watched someone slowly, determinedly self-destruct. And we keep asking in many ways, do you want to stop this? For some, only 38 years of misery would be a break. They have more of a lifetime of it. I think healing comes in many forms. Sometimes it's physical. Our bodies seem to have this program to try to heal themselves. You know, we get a cut, skin heals, injured inside. We don't see it, it heals up. It's kind of working that way. And sometimes what happens, it looks like a miracle. You know, somebody get an X-ray, CAT scan, MRI, and there's this mass internally, and you know, they go back and check it in another couple weeks. Nothing there. The year I retired, I was lifting more than I should and needed to have surgery. And so my doctor said, you know, that's easy to diagnose, you got a hernia, but let's do a CAT scan, you know, so we know exactly what's going on. So on 4:15 on Friday afternoon, I get a call from the doctor's nurse. And she said, well, we got your CAT scan back. There's something on your pancreas. I said, what does it mean? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, can I talk to the doctor? Well, she's going home. Well, my attitude right then was pretty much full-on panic. You know, I had an aunt that died of pancreatic cancer. I've had friends that have had pancreatic cancer. It's a terrible disease. So I finally got a hold of a physician friend of mine, and he said, oh, don't worry about it. He said, you know, we've run these tests, and there's always more things that we find that we really don't understand. The inside of your body is as different as the outside of our bodies are. Well, that kind of got my panic down to only partial. And then a couple of weeks later, I have more tests, and they say, oh, there's nothing. Was that a miracle? Or was it just faulty diagnosis? Sometimes miracles happen. And sometimes healing is not physical as much as it is mental or emotional or spiritual. And when we ask, do you want to be made well, it's kind of like we're asking from God's perspective, do you really want to get well? I mean, we believe that God is at least curious about our desires. I've been pretty fortunate health-wise. I've had some surgeries. I think Willis Knighton saved my life one time with antibiotics. But I'm able to do many things that a number of people my age can't. I got to go water skiing on my 70th birthday. There's been people around to help. I mean, there's been medical care, and there's been good people that could give me counsel when there were issues other than just health. But I'm aware that a lot of people aren't so fortunate. And they continually struggle with worse problems, and they maybe have fewer resources. And they want to have healing, but they just simply can't take up their mat anymore. I live with such a person. In the last 2.5 years, she has suffered chronic pain. She has had surgeries and many therapies and injections and pills. They've more or less helped, but the problem continues. And I know some of you understand this exactly because it's you or someone in your family or someone you're very close to. We continue to seek treatment or remain optimistic. But that reality is in my head as I think about this healing story. We just can't expect because we're Christians we're not going to have any problems. We're not going to have any pain. You know, as anyone above the age of 2 knows, life is not fair. People suffer, sometimes for no good reason. And faith doesn't give us a free pass from pain and unpleasantries. Sometimes we build a house of our own pain that we can do something about. Sometimes we have something on us that isn't our fault in any way. We just find ways through our faith to better deal with it. There's a poet by the name of Barry Shepherd who was thinking about this story from John when he writes, "These waters I must trouble for myself in an age of the absence of angels. I plunge first of the day to break the surface of the pool and commence my daily reaching after miracles, swimming laps at almost 81. The miracle I seek these recent years has been defined and then redefined by that old friendly temporizer, yet. So no longer seeking not to die at all, just not to die quite yet, to win a couple more bonus years in which to pen another poem or two or file a few more chosen words on this heap I have. Any healing that might come will clearly have to be short-term. Until, that is, I reach the final turn and take up my beggar's bed and walk." You have listened very well today. Perhaps at some point I have talked about you. I hope I have also talked about the power of God to bring us faith and encouragement, sometimes just patience, to deal with what we have. And you have the power to change what you need to change